101 Talk City, Talk City, Talk City, Talk City.
Yes, and you are here. We are here together. Talk City 91.1 FM. It is the 9th of March. It's the day after International Women's Day. The date has gone, but the struggle, the challenge, the journey continues. And to give us a little idea of what is happening, we spoke with Nadine Spence yesterday about some of the things that are happening in Jamaica. We keep it right here in Trinidad and Tobago. Today speaking with Dr. Angelique Nixon, and she is of the Institute of Gender and Development Studies. And we say good morning to you, ma'am.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And give us a little idea of what happened yesterday, please, because I know that one thing that did take place was the open forum at St. Augustine, UB St. Augustine.
Yes, there was a public forum hosted by Solesis, as well as the Organization for Abused and Battered Individuals, with the director, Sherna Alexander, as well as Dr. Gabrielle Hossain, who is the head of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies, and Professor Hutchinson of the Department of Behavioral and Clinical Sciences here at UE as well, and also the Assistant Police Commissioner, Garrick. So the theme for yesterday's forum was around safety and how we secure safety for issues around domestic violence and abuse. And the title of the forum was called Safety, Health, and Empowerment of Women in Trinidad and Tobago. It was very, very vibrant, a lot of information. And in fact, Mr. Garrick was asked a lot of questions, in particular being the representative of the police service. So there was a lot of questions about what are the services that women and people who are feeling or experiencing any kind of domestic violence, what can you access, what are some of the failures of the police service in terms of reporting, in terms of offering assistance. And it was a very, very vibrant conversation, unheated conversation about those issues. Some of the things that came up, as they usually do, is in terms of the reporting. Some of the data that gets circulated indicates, right, so that the police service puts out a report that says these are many counts of or reports of domestic violence, and it's broken down by offense, right, according to the Domestic Violence Act legislation. And then the intimate partner violence and what results in homicide or murders, that's listed as separate, right, murders. And there's a list, they're disaggregated by gender, but we don't know who the perpetrators are. So I think that the numbers have been something like in the last year, 66 and 44. Right? It's something like that. I need to pull up the correct numbers. But it seems as if close to the same amount of men and women have been killed, but it's unclear who perpetrated that violence, right? So one of the things that we talked about a little bit was that, like, how do we know, like, if domestic violence is writ largely as things that happen within the home, we know by and large in terms of the kinds of violence that women experience that it's overwhelming in Trinidad and Tobago, as it is globally. And so, it's very, very clear that women experience the brunt of violence, but it's also clear that that there's a lot of violence, right? And that's something that was sort of the larger context of our conversation yesterday, but at the same time drawing attention to the ways that women experience exceptional amounts of violence, and also because of sexism and because of patriarchy and because of women having to bear the brunt of proving what has happened to them, a lot of victim blaming, that women should be responsible for what happens to them, then women often don't get believed or have a lot of difficulty reporting what is happening. So gender-based violence was the focus.
Okay, you spoke about the occasion being one that was full of vibrant discussion. Where does this discussion go from there? What is the next point?
Well, I think at least for what the conversation yesterday, I think there was a lot of, a lot of different organizations being represented who wanted to ask questions specifically to the police service. I think there was a lot of response and questions to the researchers on to say, oh, well, what do these studies suggest, et cetera. And then also what Dr. Hussain highlighted was what does it mean to do activism and work around these issues and the difficulty of that. And, posing the question, right? When do women's lives really matter, right? Do women's lives really matter, and how? And thinking about that, and to really raise the issue of how data is used. And I think so next, I mean, we announced the march yesterday. So the work on gender-based violence, as you know, happens all year round. This is not just the one day. It's just for International Women's Day. The issues around gender inequality, how we talk about it, gender discrimination, come to the fore in many societies around the world because it's the day that, has been earmarked for the celebration and the honoring of women, but also to say gender inequality still exists. How do we confront it? So I think yesterday was around, really highlighting the challenges and what is still going on. And there were particular things that I think the police service highlighted for themselves that need improvement around reporting, around making sure people feel comfortable, and some of the inadequacy of the legislation and the juris around the law. So from here, I think that a lot of CSOs, civil society organizations, NGOs who do work around women's issues and gender equality and fighting against gender-based violence are coming together. This coalition of organizations are coming together on Saturday for the march, which is on Saturday, March 11th. And it starts at 3 p.m. at the Hollows at the Queen's Park, Savannah. Again, this Saturday, and it's a coalition of organizations. We've partnered with the Office of the Prime Minister Gender and Child Affairs Division, as well as UN Women. And we're saying women's rights are everyone's responsibility. Bring your message and come. And all are invited to join. Men, women, different organizations, youth, whoever wants to come and raise the concern, gender-based violence being a major issue. But also for International Women's Day this year, the message internationally is be bold for change. And one of the highlights around economic violence and wage inequality, right? Globally, women tend to make way less than men, and so highlighting those other dynamics of gender inequality as well, and issues like share the care, responsibility of the home, which still are very, 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 very gendered across the world, and certainly in the region and in Trinidad and Tobago, where women still do the majority of care work, whether it be for children or for elders. So many, many things, right? The right to safety, being in the street. So one of the big things that's coming out of Carnival this year, and a campaign that I worked on called Leave Me Alone, Leave She Alone, with Say Something and Together We, and Caraman, really pushing for this idea of like reclaiming our streets. We deserve to be safe. It's everyone's responsibility for women and girls to feel safe. So those are some of the things.
And I'm actually looking at some of the images, one of them being Calypso Rose in a Leave Me Alone t-shirt, and that also makes me remember that there were government agencies that actually took up the mantle of hashtag Be Bold for Change. When you see these kinds of affirmations happening, how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel hopeful. And that Calypso Rose, so when we approached, I being a part of Say Something, Trinidad and Tobago, which was born out of protest last year, in response to the ex-mayor of Port of Spain saying that women should be responsible for whatever happens to them. Attila Springer and myself started Say Something, and we've been doing different kinds of actions, small actions since then. And then we wanted to launch this action around Carnival time, and, it just happened coincidentally that another group thought of the same idea, and we all approached Calypso Rose, and she said yes, and she wanted to support this action. So Leave She Alone and Leave Me Alone have come out, using Calypso Rose's song and her permission and her blessing for the campaign to raise more awareness of gender-based violence, but also this idea that, yes, women's autonomy and independence and wanting to assert, that this is not okay, right? And of course, women have been saying this for many, many years in many, many different ways. But it's great to have this really a more of a public outcry, and then having someone so amazing and fabulous as Clip Server is also supporting this. We joined her, a number of us, or different organizations, and different people, men and women, joined her on stage for her Carnival Friday show to carry that message forward.
And every time I ask you, every time I see you or we speak, I'm going to ask you the power of voice and the power of actually having a voice and saying something. What are some of the gaps you see? Or let me ask that differently. What are some of the challenges that are trying to silence the voice and the movement that you see in this space?
Well, I think that there's this predominant view that one, if a woman shows up, and I just heard it on the radio yesterday. I've been seeing some comments circulating on Facebook where people have posted video or images of women whining during Carnival fetes and during Carnival Monday, Tuesday, and say, oh well, you dress like that, what you expect. Or why can't I whine? What I have a right? This idea that men and other people are entitled to a woman's body, to whine, to put forward advances, and that somehow, if you're wearing whatever it is, your costume, or wearing what's perceived of as to be too little clothing, then you should expect, a certain kind of treatment. I think that's so pervasive, and it's a part of a larger problem around entitlement of women's bodies, that women and girls' bodies are still a part of a very, very clear, sexist culture. It's a part of, this victim blaming, that look what you did. Women continue to be blamed. Women continue to bear the responsibility of having to prove that something has happened to them. And it's, it's in relationship to masculinity. So femininity and different forms of femininities and masculinities are constructed in opposition. Like, they built in opposition to each other. Like, oh, in order to be a man, I should be able to approach a woman in this way. And I think that's really toxic. It's toxic and dangerous for both men and women. It's dangerous to raise up our kids that way, because then that's how they then, experience it. So I think that's one major issue. And I think it also comes out of course, we are raised up in societies and cultures that have an incredibly violent colonial history. And, I don't think we've addressed it enough. And so we have to think about how children are raised, how young boys and young girls also experience a lot of violence in our homes, So I think we have to think about child sexual abuse. That's one of the things that came up in the forum yesterday that Professor Gerard Hutchinson talked about, who's head of the psychiatry unit at UE. He talked about the prevalence and the relationship between people who've experienced child sexual abuse and then who either later on become victims of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and or become perpetrators, right? So there's also connections between forms of violence that I think we're very much silent around. We don't want to talk about it, especially child sexual abuse and the ramifications, how that continues to affect us for many, many years, So those are some of the things that I think. Those two things are related and connected, and we need to do more about. We need to do more addressing those within our homes, within our families, within our education system. But also the state has to take responsibility as well in creating spaces and structures and resources for those kinds of changes.
In terms of making those changes and having that paradigm shift, do you think it's weighted more on the side of policy in terms of punitive measures, legislation, ways of being that are formalized, or do you think more needs to be done in soft spaces, community areas, groups, CSOs that you mentioned? How do you apportion the responsibility?
It has to be both. We can't work in silos. I mean, that's one of the other messages that Ms. Sherna Alexander raised yesterday, the founder and executive director of the Organization for Abused and Battered Women. She said a number of times that we cannot work in silos. We can't have the state working on one thing, CSOs and NGOs working on other things, community organizations at the community level working on something else. Like, we need to come together and we need to work on issues in relationship. Policy only works if there are resources and budgets and allocations, put behind it. Policy is great. We need a gender policy, absolutely. There's a huge call. One of the things that we're going to look at coming out of the march is to really push for amendments to the domestic violence legislation, to look at the protection order that women end up being more harmed and often experience more assault and indeed death after a protection order. That has to be looked at. The whole witness, how witnesses and victims of violence have to then go and in person share their testimony. It's a part of the problem of our legislation, and a part of the structure. So those things absolutely need to be changed, and resources need to be put in place to help support shelters, to help support resources, to help women who want to leave but cannot, who are in different economic situations. All of those things. But then simultaneously and in, collaboration with, or the organizations who've been doing this work also need support, and there needs to be these very clear connections and a clear coming together. And I think we're seeing that. I think that this march is going to reflect the urgency and the outcry coming out of the most recent murders, and people have felt such outrage at what's happened in the last month, And I feel like that is going to push and offer some momentum where organizations are coming together. We've had some really amazing meetings. The Institute for Gender and Development Studies has been working with and offering space to, have conversation and to really think about what we want to do for the march. So the march is just the beginning of a series of actions that we will continue to work on and to push the state around after the march is over. So it is just the beginning. We invite everybody to come out, bring your message and come. Women's rights are everyone's responsibility. Women's rights are human rights. And, I think that's a big message, and that we are united in solidarity. And also, as you pointed out, this is a regional march, right? So 7 countries across the region are having this solidarity on the same day, around the same time, under the umbrella and the momentum of Life and Leggings movement that started in Barbados, right, around sharing stories of street harassment and sexual violence. So this is a regional movement, and I think that it reflects the urgency that both women and men are saying, no, we need to stop this.
So in terms of UN Women, CAFRA TNT, Amalgamated Workers Union, Conflict Women Fire Circle, UWI IGDS, WINAD, Women Everywhere, Womantra, 2 Cents Movement, Side by Side We Stand, Say Something Pieces. Abby, I know I'm missing out a few, but who are some of the other people involved?
Well, I think that you've got everybody. Yes, so we have a lot. We have the new organization, Women Everywhere, Womantra, and I Am One, CAISO, the network of NGOs, Side by Side, 2 Cents Movement. Yeah, you have everyone listed there, Conflict Women, Fire Circle, and we're very, very pleased to be partnering with the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs Division, as well as UN Women. And, more organizations are signing up and will also be represented at the march, and we have a space, so we will join together. We have some performances. Nyla Blackman will be performing. Very excited about that. We have 2 Cents Movement also performing with some poetry. And so we have different parts of the rally and march. We're going to walk around the savannah, and we're going to share. There'll be short speeches by different groups who are sharing some of their ideas and suggestions and recommendations for change. And we also will have space for community groups and individuals to come up and share some of their concerns and, of course, suggestions. We want to be solution-driven. The march is solution-driven, and we have some clear goals and objectives, and we will continue to push. Again, this is the beginning. We're marching with purpose, and we invite everyone to join us on Saturday, March 11th at 3 p.m. at the Hollows.
And just outline for me, break it down. When you say bring your message and come, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, so for example, if I work with a number of organizations, but I also am on the board of CAISO, Sex and Gender Justice, which is doing work on sexual minority, LGBT advocacy, political advocacy for a number of years. So I would say for CAISO, I would say, well, gender-based violence impacts sexual minorities as well, not only through intimate partner violence among same-sex couples, but also that members of the LGBT community experience all forms of violence, particularly around gender presentation and gender identity. So the idea that, gay men can move in the world and then be seen by other people as being, too feminine or, not masculine enough, that has happened to young people especially, which is, Silver Lining Foundation has done work around bullying and anti-bullying work, where young people experience bullying around how they are perceived of as not being masculine enough or not being feminine enough. And that has a huge impact, or questioning their sexual orientation. So these things are rooted in gender, rooted in sexism. So I would bring that message. I would say, members of the LGBT community are also affected by gender-based violence in these ways, and this is how we want to confront and face that. So, for example, that's whatever issue that organizations have and how they want to intersect with issues around gender equality. We want people to come and discuss. We want to talk about violence broadly. We want to talk about how it impacts all of us, because domestic violence is not just some issue that affects women. Gender-based violence is not some issue that only affects women. It affects all of us. So we're hoping that comes through. But other issues like, economic issues, feeling safe, access to resources, things that people want, to change in our communities. I mean, I think all of those things are welcome. So, again, we want all groups to feel comfortable and just raise their voices and raise their concerns.
Dr. Angelique Nixon, we want to thank you so much for your time and giving us this information this morning on Talk City 91.1 FM.
Thank you so much. Again, March 11th, Saturday, 3 p.m., Women's Rights March and Rally.
Yes, ma'am. And this is the Coalition of Organizations Against Gender-Based Violence, Trinidad and Tobago, in solidarity with the Life in Leggings Caribbean Alliance Against Gender-Based Violence. Life in Leggings TT, Women's Rights March and Rally. It's on this Saturday, March 11, 2017. And Dr. Nixon, she spoke about Attila Springer. Attila Springer actually brought a song to my attention, Poser, Woman of the Land. We play that now on Talk City 91.1 FM.